They took one of our own in the shadows, like cowards. Alino Faso was not a soldier. He carried no gun, he fought with his voice, his heart and his love for our country. And for that they killed him. To those who think they can silence our truth, you have only made it louder. Alino's name will not fade, it will rise. And with it, so will the fire of a nation that refuses to kneel. We are not waiting for justice, we are becoming it.
Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to Ibrahim Traoré's era. Today we tell a story soaked in sorrow, but burning with purpose. A story of one voice that echoed so loudly they tried to silence it behind bars. And when that failed, they silenced the man himself. Alino Faso, born Alino Traoré, a son of the land, a digital warrior, a patriot without a gun. With over 400,000 followers on Facebook and a reputation as a fearless defender of African dignity, Alino had become one of the most powerful civilian voices in support of President Ibrahim Traoré. He didn't wear a uniform, but he fought on the front lines of information warfare. His weapon, truth. His enemy, neo-colonialism. He exposed the rot. He named names, and he refused to bow. That for some made him dangerous. He was bold, sometimes controversial, but never corrupt. When politicians traded integrity for foreign favors, Alino called them out by name. When the West whispered about democracy while exporting destabilization, Alino called it what it was, manipulation. And when anyone dared to challenge the dignity of the Burkina Faso people, Alino's voice was the first to rise. He was more than an activist. He was a movement in one man, a thunderclap in the middle of a long silence. In January 2025, while visiting Abidjan, Alino was arrested by Ivorian authorities. They charged him for colluding with foreign powers. The irony? He was warning Africa about those very same foreign powers. He had been in the city for just 3 days, reportedly to meet fellow Pan-African digital activists. But those meetings never happened. Surveillance footage showed him being taken into custody by plainclothes officers. After that he vanished. For 6 months there was no official word. The Ivorian state refused to confirm or deny his detention. Every request for legal representation was denied. Human rights groups raised alarms. The Burkina Faso media demanded transparency. But silence was the only response. He was kept in a military compound, locked away from daylight, from communication, from legal recourse. Reports later leaked from a whistleblower described beatings, threats, sleep deprivation and psychological torture. They didn't want information from him. They wanted him broken, but he didn't break. Then came July 24, 2025. The announcement hit social media before it reached his family. A tweet from an Ivorian journalist simply read, "Breaking. Influencer Alino Faso dead. Reported suicide in custody." The Ivorian government called it suicide, claimed he slit his wrists, then hanged himself with bedsheets. But the people of Burkina Faso didn't buy it. Not for 1 second. There were no photos, no autopsy, no transparency, no timeline, just a brief sterile statement. From Ouagadougou to Bobo Dioulasso, the streets erupted. People gathered in silence, then in protest, then in rage. Flags were raised, banners printed, his face, his name, his message everywhere. One chant rose above the crowd. Justice for Alino. Mothers held their children tighter. Fathers clenched their fists. Youth carried signs. Vendors closed their shops. For a man many never met, but all felt connected to. The Burkina Faso government rejected the suicide narrative immediately. Ministers called it what it looked like: assassination, an execution behind closed doors. The facts were damning. No due process, no contact with family, no lawyer, no official statement until after the news leaked. No communication for 6 months. Worse, his death was posted online before his mother even got a call. President Ibrahim Traoré gave Ivory Coast 48 hours. Explain, or face consequences. The people stood behind him. Not in fear, in fury. It wasn't about political games. It was about dignity. Burkina Faso had been insulted. A son had been killed. And his blood soaked not just foreign ground, but the conscience of an entire region. Over 200,000 Burkina Faso citizens flooded the streets. Young, old, Christian, Muslim, rural, urban. Alino wasn't just a blogger. He was a brother, a son, a symbol. They said he died for loving Burkina Faso too much. They might be right, And that's what terrified his enemies the most. Because Alino wasn't just a critic. He was a builder. He used his platform to educate, to empower, to call people to organize, not just complain. He spoke of sovereignty, of a self-reliant Africa, of an era where our leaders answer to the people, not foreign banks. He was, in every sense of the word, revolutionary. And now, he was gone. But if those who silenced him thought his death would be the end, they miscalculated. They didn't just kill a man. They awakened a nation. Burkina Faso was no longer demanding answers. It was preparing for action. The government didn't need to stoke the fire. The fire had already spread. And in that fire, one truth stood clear. Alino may have died behind bars, but his voice escaped, and it is now in millions of others. The Ivorian government offered no answers. No names, no timeline, no details. Just a statement as cold as a steel gate. They said he killed himself. That was all. But the Burkina Faso people were not asking. They were demanding. Within hours of Traoré's ultimatum, the Ivorian ambassador in Ouagadougou was summoned. Inside the walls of the Ministry of Foreign Affairs, things were not polite. Words like betrayal, cowardice, and complicity echoed through the halls. The message was clear. This was not just a crime. It was an insult to every Burkina Faso citizen. Outside, the crowds grew. Independence Square became a sea of red, green, and gold. Youth groups, civil servants, teachers, imams, priests, market women, war veterans, all standing shoulder to shoulder. No political party, no tribal divisions, just one people, one voice. They didn't just want an apology, they wanted accountability. Protesters marched to the Ivorian embassy. They carried Alino's portrait, flowers, signs, and in some cases coffins painted with the words, "Justice delayed is justice denied." And still, Abidjan said nothing. Traoré addressed the nation that night. No teleprompter, no diplomat speak. Just a man speaking to his people. They want us to grieve quietly. They want us to bury Alino and move on. But we will not move on. We will move forward. And that path leads through justice, not forgiveness without truth. The next morning, Burkina Faso recalled its ambassador from Ivory Coast. And then the country waited for a response that never came. So the people responded instead. Ivorian businesses began closing across Burkina Faso, not by government order, by public will. Gas stations, retail outlets, logistics hubs. One by one, doors were shut. Not vandalized, not looted, just shut. Peacefully, powerfully. They called it the Alino boycott. And it spread fast. Artists dropped protest tracks. Radio hosts refused to play Ivorian content. Cultural centers canceled cross-border events. Children painted murals of Alino next to Sankara. And in mosques, churches, and open-air ceremonies, one prayer echoed louder than all: let the truth come out, or let the system come down. Traoré made his next move clear. Burkina Faso would push for an international, African-led investigation into Alino's death. A commission made of independent legal minds from across the continent. No Western interference. No foreign fingerprints. If that was rejected, then diplomatic ties would be severed. Trade suspended. Border controls enforced. Because to Traoré and his people, this was not just about one man. It was about principle, sovereignty, respect. Burkina Faso would not be the kind of country where a son is murdered, and the mother is told to move on. Not under this leadership. Not in this era. The opposition within Burkina Faso even had to fall silent. Critics of Traoré, who once called Alino a propaganda agent, now found themselves on the wrong side of history. Even they had to admit, the people had chosen their martyr. In Abidjan, things weren't so quiet. The Ivorian president faced protests of his own. Pan-African student groups rallied outside his palace. Hashtags like "Justice for Alino" and "Africa is One" began trending in cities far beyond Burkina Faso. In Bamako, the Malian prime minister offered to host Alino's funeral. Guinea's president condemned the death publicly. Senegalese opposition leaders demanded their government cut ties with Ivory Coast until answers were given. Alino had become more than a symbol in his own country. He was becoming a symbol for the region. Some Western media began reporting the story, carefully, cautiously, but they refused to call it what it was. They said alleged abuse, suspected mistreatment, and even unconfirmed reports. But for the people of Africa, it was already confirmed. Not by courtrooms, by conscience. The streets kept pulsing. The boycott grew. independent legal associations across the continent signed an open letter calling for international observers. A coalition of journalists launched an investigative series, and in the face of all that pressure, the Ivorian regime, still silent, but history has a way of forcing silence into confession. The truth, when held back, only grows heavier, and the truth was coming. Traoré ended the week with a simple statement: "We gave them 48 hours. We gave them 7 days. Now we will give them something else: isolation." And so began what would become the first full diplomatic breakdown between two ECOWAS nations over a political prisoner. But this was no ordinary case, because this was not just about Alino the man. This was about Alino the mirror that showed Africa what it looked like under the shadow of fear, and what it could become under the light of courage. Alino Faso was just one man, one voice, but in death, he became a chorus that cannot be silenced. What began as an arrest in the shadows has erupted into a continental reckoning. Burkina Faso did not mourn passively. It stood up, and in standing up it inspired others to do the same. This was not just about justice for a fallen patriot. It was about reclaiming dignity for a people long underestimated. It was about showing the world that Africans are no longer disposable pawns in the games of power and silence. Alino's blood turned into fuel, not for war, but for awakening. The people did not ask for revenge. They demanded respect. They did not burn embassies. They closed them with unity. They didn't scream for violence. They demanded answers, truth, and sovereignty. That is strength. That is revolution. And to the powers that believe they can outlast this wave of defiance, know this: Alino may have fallen, but 1,000 others have risen. His words live on in the hearts of schoolchildren, in the chants of the youth, and in the resolve of a government that refuses to kneel. Captain Ibrahim Traoré didn't just lead a government. He led a people through fire. He turned grief into strategy. He turned silence into movement. Burkina Faso is not grieving anymore. It is rising. The name Alino Faso will be remembered, not because of how he died, but because of what he made impossible to ignore: truth, courage, the right to exist without permission. And in the heart of every Burkinabe citizen, one vow remains: never again in silence, never again in chains. Long live Alino Faso. Long live the new era. Long live Burkina Faso.